Welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Well, welcome everybody. Here we are on the Quiet Warrior Show. My name is Tom Dutta. I am your host for the day. I'm excited to introduce you soon to our guest. Now we're live streaming across the platforms of LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. Live streaming is like peeking into the studio as we tape this episode for the Quiet Warrior Show. What you'll find, everyone, is this will be released on the Quiet Warrior Show podcast platform in the near future, and we will be scheduling a YouTube premiere video. Very exciting stuff. Well, the show's all about the guests, so today I'd like to introduce Simone Knego. Simone, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me today.
It's exciting. Yes, me too. And everybody, I just want to mention how we met. I'm an author and I read a lot of books, and I connected with someone who knew Simone, and well, she might tell us about her book at some point. I read it and I was blown away by the story, and I thought, what a great topic to talk about this time of the year. Now you're over there in Sarasota, Florida. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. I'm up here in sunny Florida. Well, I like to say that up here in Vancouver, British Columbia, it's sunny every day, but I'd be lying to you and all the people up here. But today is actually a fairly good day, and it's approaching the festive season. I know you just had your Thanksgiving. So everybody, I'd like to tell you a little bit about this great guest, Simone. She leads an extraordinary life filled with She leads an ordinary life filled with extraordinary moments. Well, so far in just getting to know you and reading your book, I think there's nothing ordinary about you, Simone. You're a wife, mother of 6 children and 3 dogs. That's an interesting ratio in itself. A serial entrepreneur. You split your time between family, business, and personal growth. And you're doing something to inspire others to embrace life's ups and downs and realize the impact that they're making on the world. And I know that you've been through a journey yourself. So why don't we get into your backstory? Some people go right back to their childhood, and whatever you want to do, take us back to, the beginning of your story and how it defined you to the point of writing the book that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. So I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and I have one sister. And I really had a good childhood. Both my parents were physicians, and they always wanted something better for us than how they had it when they were kids. And so, my childhood was, I have to say, it was a really good childhood with really loving parents. And, my story itself, in terms of where I am now and having 6 kids and 3 dogs and, it was an evolution. It was a journey. And, I think that really what I like to tell people and what I like to talk about is that I think sometimes for me, I struggled for a very long time thinking that I wasn't enough. I wasn't doing things that mattered. And so that's really kind of how, when I finally had the realization that, wait, what you're doing is more than enough, my whole mindset changed. And so all of my stories shaped me into the person I am today, and really how I've moved forward on my journey, and all the crazy things that we have, happen in our lives are all kind of part of my story.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm going to jump right into that, and I want to say a couple things about the journey I went on in my head when you talked about your parents and you're not enough, and then the defining moment of what you're doing today, really showing people to embrace the ups and downs in their life and really see that they are enough. I think what I love about you and your story so far, Simone, and as we get to talk deeper about it, is we're hoping there'll be many people watching this from around the world that will sit back and say, wait a minute, that's my story. Maybe I grew up somehow feeling that I'm not enough, and I was measuring myself against something else. I want to tell you that you and I exchanged a few things offline and want to honor that. My father was an electrician. In fact, my parents were born in Fiji, and my father's dad died back there. So my dad came here, I think barely finishing grade 12, and he started pumping gas like most immigrants, became an electrician, became a teacher. And my dad always wanted a better life for us. What I found personally through the early years, and my story is very, very much deeper, which we won't focus on today, is that I was measuring myself against others. And that's what led to my own lack of self-worth or feeling I wasn't enough. And even in school, I grew up in the, what we'll just call the middle class to upper class neighborhood. And my dad wanted the best for us because he didn't have it. So we had a nice house, and he worked hard, and my mom worked hard to try and, give us this better life. But what I found along the way is I was around these kids who had fancy cars and things, and I didn't have all that. It's all this pressure that I was under. And even when I started achieving in my own career, I started still in my soul feeling, wait a minute, it just still doesn't feel right. I still don't feel like I'm enough. The last thing I'll say on that, because I'm honoring the connection I have to your story, is that it took me a long time to figure out that unless I was born and I can say I am enough, I can't go out in service to others. And it wasn't any job or paycheck or accomplishment or measuring up to my parents' wishes that defined who I was. It was really that I was enough. And I remember I said to my daughter before she went off to university, and I'll turn it back to you on this note. I said to her, I said, I don't think I did a good job of telling you this, but I said, it doesn't matter if you get a degree. It doesn't matter if you be a professional, even if you want to do something artistic. I love you and you are enough. And that's the message I wish I had heard when I was younger. And parents are great, but they grow up with their own belief systems, and they don't always know that that's the message sometimes that, we want to hear. So I'm admiring this story. Everybody, I'm going to read this out of the one sheet from your book. Now, your book is called Extraordinary, Unordinary You by Simone. And there's 5 points here. One that really got my attention was 6 kids, 2 shoes on the wrong feet, 1 minivan, and a family of rats. And I looked at that, Simone, and I went, oh, rats. Now, I've rambled a bit for a reason to plant my thinking into your head. Just riff on this. I mean, what the heck is that all about in the rats part? I mean, I'm thinking, like, what are we talking about?
So we have a lot of great stories. And I think what's really important, again, to be true to ourselves, we have to share the good, the bad, the ugly, the sad. You kind of have to share it all to really kind of be true to what, if I'm putting myself out there and saying, I now look in the mirror and say that I am more than enough. And I have failures all of the time. I have, crazy things happen all of the time. And that's okay, because that's part of life. So we had an event where I was out of town. I was in Israel for a couple of weeks, and our kids were at summer camp. And there's a whole nother backstory to this, because my son he got bitten by a poisonous snake at summer camp.
Oh, no.
He had to be life flighted to the children's hospital. He spent 3 days in the ICU, and my husband, so that's another story, went to meet him there, to be with him until they could come home. And fortunately, everything went well and he was able to come home. Well, I returned from Israel, they returned from summer camp, and I had to take him to a physical therapist because his arm was locked in place from the swelling. So we get into the van, and I look back at him and ask him to buckle himself. And I'm looking at the car thinking, okay, it's usually a moving trash can, but I've never seen it look this bad. Why is there popcorn everywhere? I mean, I haven't been home in 2 weeks. How can there be popcorn all over the seats? I start backing up. I look back again and think, that isn't popcorn. So I'm like, Noah, get out of the car. And so we're in the driveway. He jumps out of the car. I look, and what I realized is that rats had chewed on all of the seats. Somehow they got in through the engine block. And of course they had a feast, because it's a minivan for 6 children. And there were, it literally ended up, the car was totaled because the rats ate the seats. There was so much damage from the rats chewing on the seats that it wasn't fixable. So one of my great moments as a really, taking care of my car really well, but So that was it's always a fun story to tell because, even the insurance agent said, in my 20 something years of experience, I've never had to say to someone, I'm sorry, your car has, been totaled because rats ate your seat. And I was like, okay, I like to have that status. I'm happy with it.
I want to jump in and honor you. First of all, I love this story. Thank you. It reminds you of those insurance commercials that I can't remember the name of the insurance company, where they showed the bull coming through the front windshield of the car, and I think they said, "Been there, done that." Well, I nominate your story for one of those commercials. I think what I gathered from your book, what you're trying to express to people is, and let's go back to you again. As you've said, growing up as a mom, I mean, I realized later in life, looking back, that the work my mom did raising 3 children while, my traditional father went out into the work field is a full-time job, and it's hard work. And in fact, harder than most of the work people do out, in corporate America. And so it takes a special person to be able to do that. And then I looked at what I think you're trying to do is take those extraordinary moments in your life and somehow give a message to your audience or your readers. The thing I loved about that story you told, I just want to play it back for those who are just chiming in. We're talking about a minivan and rats destroying it and totaling the van, but you also said something else, that at that same time there was more going on behind the scenes. You were over here in another country, and your son was at a camp, and there was a snake bite and very serious stuff. When you talk, there's this resilience, there's this energy, there's this strength behind your words. I mean, almost like happiness. And that, I think, tell me more about that. How have you learned to embrace the downs and turn them into those extraordinary things to keep moving forward in this life?
So a couple of things. One is I have a really strong mother. She grew up in rural Pennsylvania. She lived on a farm. Her mom had a 6th grade education. Her dad worked in a brewery and a coal mine, and she knew she wanted to be educated. And she worked really hard, and she got into the University of Pittsburgh. And while she was in school, she worked 3 jobs, and she then got into medical school. She was one of 5 women in her medical school in the late 1950s. So she really kind of, if we talk about resilience and the ability to move forward through adversity, she's it. I mean, there was definitely, she struggled, but, she was such a good role model for me. And, I think probably for a long time, I probably, looked at the struggles she had and thought, I'm not struggling, so I must not, what I'm doing must not be enough. Right. And,
Yeah.
and I think that's a really big part of my thinking. But I had a moment where, I know a lot of times people will say that I had to put my career on hold while I was raising my kids. And I always think to myself, especially now, that raising your kids is part of your journey. It's really not putting anything on hold. And I feel like sometimes we devalue like what we do as moms. And I think I did for a long time too. I mean, again, what am I doing? And then I had a friend say to me once that when times were really tough with her kids, she said that she was growing her garden, and that's how she looked at her children, like to bring beauty to the world. And to me, that was such a great way to say it. And I just think that I've been, surrounded again with a mom who, worked really hard. And I now look at myself and say, like, all of these things you do every day, they matter. They're important. And you got to keep looking at yourself like that.
Oh, thank you. I just want to say this is a teaching moment on the show, and I'm going to highlight it, that what you just heard Simone say is that, she had a hardworking mom, and she drove herself to measure up and be hardworking, but never really realized that the things that she does, raising children, being a mom, are extraordinary. I've heard that many times, even in my career growing up, that, I never had any sisters, so I was raised to be cleaning the house and cooking at a young age. And even when I got married to my wife, who is a professional manager, I would come home and cook and clean. And to me, there was no rules. It was everybody was on the same level, not man's work, not women's work. That's my belief system. A lot of the guys I grew up with, it's like they're out at the bar after, and it's, my wife's job to do the cooking. And then I'd be around some women in the workplace who would be strong and confident, and others would say, I was just a mom before I started working. And I think you're right. I mean, we have to make the choice to change the meaning of being a mom and doing the work. Because I remember he's talked about farming I read somewhere that back in the early years before the Industrial Revolution, I'd like to know what you think about this. Men and women were on the farm raising their children. The men were equally doing all the chores, they were sitting at the dinner table every night, with the children. The Industrial Revolution comes, and they, for whatever reason, were the ones that left the farm to go to work. All of a sudden, all that work that they shared fell onto the shoulders of the women or the moms. And I think we forget that sometimes. So thank you for honoring us with that story. There's another one I wanted to ask you to talk about, see what we can learn from you here, is tell us about Kilimanjaro.
So I had the honor of climbing Kilimanjaro. I think it's been 5 years ago now. And I say the honor, I mean, it was a big challenge, but I had the opportunity to climb it with the Live Strong Foundation. And, they raise money for cancer patients, cancer research. They, really cover the spectrum on there. And a friend of ours had climbed it, and he had asked my husband if he was interested. And my story is my husband said, 1, 2, 3, no, call Simone. He doesn't remember it exactly like that. He's like, oh, I might have considered it, but he did not consider it. And I ended up going and climbing with 16 strangers. And, it was really about leadership and learning how to work together in extremely challenging situations. And do we stick together? Do we, how do we make it to the top? What's the best way to move forward? And it really was a life-changing experience for me. It was incredibly powerful. Met people who, cancer survivors, people supporting cancer survivors, people who had lost family and friends to cancer. And it was even more powerful, looking back at it now. At the time, my dad actually passed away last year from cancer. And when I climbed Kilimanjaro, it was before he got sick. And so now looking back, it really, has a greater purpose, greater meaning for me, because really honoring him on that climb as well.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm sorry about the loss of your father. I remember you wrote to me about that, and keep the spotlight on honoring your dad with this show. Maybe I told you that I know the feeling, but can't know your feeling. I lost my dad just a couple of years ago too. Climbing Kilimanjaro and the cancer connection there. Somebody said to me before, I don't know if you've heard of the Tough Mudder show, Tough Mudder, and there's a saying, it goes like this: when was the last time you did something for the first time? And it seems to me that through your life, Kilimanjaro is an example that you're an amazing woman who continues to push yourself to extraordinary levels. That's pretty awesome what you did. And so, we send a prayer to your family about the loss of your father. What is one thing you learned from your dad, now that we talk about him, that we can honor him with? What's one thing that you carried with you, whether it's in your belief system or whatever, with you today?
Oh, I learned so many things. So I think one of the biggest things I learned was not to back down. That to, really, if you sign up for something, you should finish it. And that even when it gets tough, you have to see it through. And that's how he grew up, and I definitely think it made me a stronger person. And if I have a follow-up to that, I would say that really unconditional love. And, we, as we adopted 3 of our children. And, our parents grew up at a time where, that wasn't like the norm, or that wasn't, I don't even want to say norm, but that wasn't, because I could have had more biological children. But one of the things he said to me is that your children are all your children, and I will love any child and every child just the same. And, to me, that was a really, really important piece in my journey.
Well, thank you. And you read my mind. I was going to go there about the six pack in the book, and in that line I read about 6 kids, 2 shoes on the wrong feet. That I do realize from reading your book that there were 3 adopted children, and I want to first of all honor you and the courage to do that. Many people don't, and there's so many children who need a home. I'm thinking out loud here, but there you are with 3 children, and of course 3 dogs, and the entrepreneurial career, and all this going on. It's like, who needs that headache? But then when I look at this, tell us why you adopted. And I got a message out of your book about that. Let's see if you can remind me about that.
Yeah, I mean, we honestly, there's just so many amazing kids in the world just waiting for a family to love them, and we really felt like we could be that family. And for us, and our friends thought we had lost our minds because, why don't you just have another biological child? And we said, because again, there's so many kids that need a family. And again, it's not about rescuing kids. It's about, this is how we chose to grow our family. I mean, our kids, really started at a place of loss. When you think about it, they lost the first family that they had. And so for us, it's just kind of stepping up to do, the best job that we can do. And just, again, unconditional love, just making sure that they know, how much we love them.
That's fantastic. That's awesome. Can you just tell us the ages of the adopted kids, boys, girls?
So we have, of our 6 kids, we have 3 boys, 3 girls.
Okay.
Our youngest, our oldest is 24 boy, then 20 girl, then 17 girl. And then our son, who is 16, is from Ethiopia. Our son, who is 14, is from South Korea. And then our daughter, who's 13, is also from Ethiopia.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, it's a rainbow. I'm in Canadian, as our country's all about rainbows and families. I can't say that I've adopted. I can't say that I raised 2 sons that were from my previous wife's marriage. And one of the things I found most challenging is when you bring human beings together that have different belief systems, different values, different cultures. It's really amazing. The work is almost like there's no magic formula to get everybody getting along. Like we mentioned the Brady Bunch when we were talking. What are some of your secrets or things you've done to be able to gel the tribe? I mean, it's got to be incredible.
We started from the beginning. We started with everybody had to buy into the process. So, we took a blind vote for each adoption. Now, our first adoption, when Noah was, 4 months old, and the kids were younger. So, they probably just thought, oh, this is going to be cool. We're going to have a new brother. But as time went on, even for our last adoption for our youngest daughter, the kids all had to vote. And I think I do talk about this in the book. My daughter, Olivia, instantly wrote down on a piece of paper, the word yes. And I said, you didn't hesitate when you voted yes. And she said, Mom, we're talking about the life of another child. How can anyone vote no? And,
Wow.
So from the beginning, we made sure that the kids understood, that we were all in this together. And we are all in this together. It's not just me or my husband raising these kids. It's the entire family raising the family.
Yeah, absolutely. And so life, as we know, isn't a straight line up, especially from reading your book and learning about what you teach, that it's looking at the ups and downs. And I think I'm trying to put my words in your words, that from what I saw, you've taught us, the adversity brings strength. Looking at both ups and downs reminds us that we are extraordinary. In fact, I think a lot of people, we're wired, I know this from the brain science work I study, that we're wired to think negatively, to think the worst will happen. But what I realize is in your life, from reading about your journey, that you've been through many things, hard things as well, including self-worth questions about your own, Am I enough? But you come out the other side, and that is extraordinary. When I listen to your story, and it's something I talk about my own background, there's so many people who will watch or listen to someone like you and be inspired, but they'll be quietly in desperation stuck saying, I wish I could. I know I still don't feel I'm enough, or I could never climb Kilimanjaro. Or my somebody said I was a loser, or whatever it is, and they can't get through that. So you are extraordinary. I want to just tell you that on this show. Tell us about the book. I want to get you to hold it up again so we can see it when it was published. Anything you want to say about that?
There it is. The Extraordinary, Unordinary You. And it was published in last month in October. And it's my story. I didn't let any of my family read it before I was finished because I wanted it to be really my words, my story, and not their input into it. Because I think it would have been a totally different book if they would have chimed in on everything. I really, my hope is that if it changes one person's mind, if it helps one person, then I've done my job. And I feel that, one of the big things I talk about is that, same thing for me, feeling like I wasn't enough. But what I realized is that I didn't need to change myself. I needed to change the way I saw myself. And that's really what brought along change for me. And again, looking at, comparing ourselves to others and saying, oh, she climbed Kilimanjaro, I could never do that. Well, everybody has something that they do that someone else can't do, right? We are all special in our own ways, and we really are more than enough. And we really have to look at ourselves and see and stop comparing ourselves to everybody else, because that doesn't make you stronger. It makes, it's a waste of time, I believe. I think that you really need to, build yourself up looking at what you are doing every day, because everything you do matters.
Wow, thank you so much. I mean, what a great teaching moment. Everybody come back and just listen to the show for that part of it, and go and get the book, The Extraordinary, Unordinary You. And there's so many stories in there that teach that point that we just heard. Here's the thing why I so deeply admire you for your work, Simone, is that I've spent a lot of time trying to figure out myself throughout my own life as a business leader with something that was not quite right in my thinking. And I learned through just my advocacy for mental health that we have things called thinking traps. And, I say that we're born golden, statues like, Buddha's statues. Oh, there's no crust on us. And then we have these neurons that are empty and there's no thoughts and emotions wired in them. And then we come into this world and stuff gets put in there. And a lot of what gets put in there sadly not true. It's stuff told to us by others. And these thinking traps, I never realized this, but they wire together as thought patterns, and the brain just plays them over and over. And it can be that one thing that somebody said to me long ago that plays in the background that discounts everything that, the world sees. Wow, Tom's successful, or he's a good person, he's good look. And I had to figure that out and unwire it. And so I want to just say again, I loved reading your book, because reading your book reminds me, like every day for someone like me, and there's millions of us that fight to move forward every day because of these thinking traps. We need to be reminded by people like you. You're an authority on your topic because you've lived that journey, and you've admitted to us on which is vulnerability. I believe that that's a strength, which in the corporate sector where I come from, it's seen as a weakness. That for you even to come out and say, at one point I didn't think I was enough. I mean, that's just awesome. There's somebody out there you're going to give courage to. And that's the beginning that for me, when I was able to admit that meant change. And I did. And today my life is that much happier. So thanks so much for that. As we wrap up here, I wanted to honor you with a few what I call leadership words. I write these down. I don't script them. You see my head turning here and looking at my paper. And so I want to honor you with these words. One is extraordinary. You are extraordinary. Congratulations. I wrote down seeker. And in the business world where I come from, visionary can be the same. You're a seeker. You were looking for the truth. You found it. Now you're teaching. Awesome. You are enough. If I looked at the word enough in the dictionary, got to see your face there. And diversity. I was thinking about the worldview you have with all these adopted children and the things you've done. Pretty spectacular. So well done. And so we're going to give it to you now to tell us where people can get a hold of you and your book and any of your work.
Thank you very much. So my book is available on Amazon. It's available online at other retailers as well. I believe I'm the only Simone Knego in the world. So if you just search me, you're going to find me. My website is SimoneKNEGO.com, and LinkedIn, Simone Knego, and Facebook is author Simone Knego. So, but basically you search my name, you're going to find me. So can't hide from me.
So those are now we can absolutely confirm that you are extraordinary because there's only one of you. Now I want to honor you with the award, and we've started doing this because it's on video whereas we're taping, but you might see in the background this screensaver. And if I turn this way, there's a guy who looks a lot like me. Mm-hmm. And when I started this show, I wanted to bring, ordinary people who have done extraordinary things to tell their story, but to learn from their authenticity of telling the struggles, not just the success. And amazing things have come out of that, including people like yourself today. And so I created this award, and it's actually a challenge coin. These were created in World War I, and they were held by soldiers to commit community to each other. So if you and I were showing up and I had mine and you didn't, well, maybe you'd buy drinks or dinner that night. This idea of these coins is spread around the world. They're used in the first responder community, AA, where my dad spent 23 years dealing with his addiction. And anywhere where communities exist, these coins are used. And so I had this one handcrafted and painted and minted in the US. Sorry, Canada. The front is the actual image of the show with some keywords that are meaningful. And the back is the hero's journey narrative illustrated from Joseph Campbell, which is really the narrative of the behind the show. It comes in a cherry box, and once COVID and mail settle down, it'll be coming out to you. By receiving it, I ask that you commit to never stopping using your purpose and your passion and your story to changing the world. And by carrying it, know that they're in, I think it's 9-10 countries now. We have Quiet Warriors quietly going on their way, serving the world. So welcome to the Quiet Warrior Tribe.
Thank you so much. What an honor. It's amazing.
You're welcome. You deserve it. And so that's all for today, everybody. Find this show when it comes out on your favorite podcast channel. Give it a high rating so we can honor Simone's work. And watch for the YouTube premiere video, which will be even more fun so we can see this play again. And live that life with passion as you see Simone does. Find that purpose as she did. And live the life that you deserve and desire. Thank you. Thank you, Simone.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. Stand by. All right.
Thank you for listening to The Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca